Happening, the FBI announcing indictments against 20 people, including 14 current and former Mississippi and Tennessee police officers in a drug-related bribery probe.
We're here today to announce the indictment and arrest of 20 individuals, most of them law enforcement officers in the Mississippi Delta region.
At 11:47 a.m. on a frozen Tuesday morning, federal authorities stood before cameras in Minneapolis and made a statement that would shatter the image of American charity forever. Over $250 million in cash had been discovered inside the walls of one of Minnesota's most celebrated humanitarian organizations. But this was not embezzlement. This was not fraud. This was something far more dangerous. What began as a routine audit into financial irregularities at a Somali-led nonprofit turned into the exposure of a transnational terror funding pipeline disguised as compassion. And the man at the center of it all wasn't just stealing from the vulnerable. He was arming those who wanted to destroy them. The organization called itself the New Horizon Relief Foundation. Its mission statement spoke of feeding the hungry, on sheltering refugees, and building hope in war-torn regions. Its CEO, a charismatic man named Ahmed Khalid Osman, was featured in glossy magazine spreads and invited to speak at government-funded diversity summits. He posed with senators. He shook hands with mayors. He collected millions in federal grants meant to resettle refugees and support at-risk youth across the Midwest. But behind that polished exterior was a man who had turned charity into a weapon, and the federal government was about to tear his empire apart. It started at 4:17 a.m. on a Sunday in late January. Minneapolis was buried under 6 inches of fresh snow. The streets were silent except for the low hum of idling engines. 43 FBI agents, 16 ICE officers, and 2 full SWAT teams assembled in the shadow of a 4-story brick building on the edge of the Cedar Riverside neighborhood. This was the headquarters of New Horizon Relief. From the outside, it looked like any other urban nonprofit office. Inside, it was a fortress of deceit. The breach was surgical. Flashbangs detonated in the stairwells. Agents in tactical black swept through hallways lined with posters of smiling children and inspirational quotes about unity. They moved fast. Offices were secured. Computers were seized. Filing cabinets were ripped open. But it was in the executive suite on the 3rd floor where the operation took a turn that no one expected. One agent noticed something off about the wall behind Osman's mahogany desk. The paint was newer. The texture didn't match. He pressed his palm against it and heard a hollow echo. Within minutes, a sledgehammer came down. The drywall crumbled, and what they found inside made every person in that room go silent. Stacks of cash, bricks of $100 bills wrapped in plastic and duct tape, row after row, layer after layer. The smell hit them first. That unmistakable scent of old paper, mildew, and something faintly chemical. The bills were damp. Some were moldy. Some had been vacuum sealed so tightly they had fused together. The agents kept pulling. They tore down more walls. They found cash in the ceiling panels. They found it under the floorboards. They found it stuffed inside fake electrical boxes and hollow support beams. By the time the sun came up, they had extracted over $18 million in U.S. currency from that single office. But that was just the beginning. While the raid team was still counting bills, another unit hit a second location 12 miles away in St. Cloud. This was a residential property listed under a shell company called North Star Logistics LLC. The house sat on 2 acres of wooded land. It looked quiet, normal. But the moment agents kicked in the front door, they knew this was no ordinary home. The living room had been gutted. In its place was a makeshift counting room. Industrial money counters lined the walls. There were vacuum sealers, shrink-wrap machines, and labeled boxes stacked to the ceiling. Each box was marked with a destination code: Nairobi, Mogadishu, Doha, Istanbul. Agents found another $23 million in that house alone. But more disturbing than the money were the documents they found in a locked safe beneath the kitchen floor. Ledgers, handwritten logs, names, dates, wire transfer confirmation, and a series of encrypted hard drives that would take analysts 3 days to crack. When they finally did, the scope of what they were looking at became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just a money laundering operation, it was a funding mechanism for a militant network operating on 3 continents. Inside a sterile room at the FBI's Minneapolis field office, forensic accountants began piecing together the trail. The numbers were staggering. Over the past 4 years, New Horizon Relief had received more than $470 million in combined funding, federal grants, state contracts, private donations, corporate sponsorships. on paper. Knowledge that money was supposed to feed refugees, provide job training, offer mental health services, and support resettlement programs. In reality, less than 30% of it ever reached the people it was intended for. The rest vanished into a web of ghost companies, fake suppliers, and fraudulent invoices. One line item claimed $8 million for emergency food shipments to East Africa. But the food never existed. The shipping company was a front. The warehouse listed as the origin point was an abandoned lot in Gary, Indiana. Another invoice showed $6 million paid to a construction firm for building community centers in Minneapolis. But the centers were never built. The construction firm was registered to a man who had been dead for 2 years. And the money didn't just disappear. It was rerouted. Laundered through currency exchanges in Dubai, wired to accounts in Turkey and Kenya, funneled into logistics networks that moved weapons, supplies, and personnel for a fictionalized militant group with ties to al-Shabaab-style operations in East Africa. The CEO, Ahmed Khalid Osman, wasn't just a thief. He was a financier, a coordinator, a bridge between American taxpayer dollars and overseas terrorism. But here's the part that made federal investigators realize they were dealing with something much bigger than one corrupt man. Osman couldn't have done this alone. The money flows were too smooth. The audits were too clean. The federal oversight was too conveniently absent. Someone with real power was protecting him. That someone was a man named Governor Vincent Harlow, not a real person. A fictional high-ranking state official who had built his career on progressive politics and public compassion. He championed refugee resettlement. He praised organizations like New Horizon Relief in press conferences. He signed off on millions in state funding without question. And according to the encrypted files found in Osman's safe, he received monthly wire transfers totaling over $2 million from accounts linked directly to the nonprofit. The ledgers didn't lie. Harlow's digital signature appeared on documents authorizing emergency grant extensions. His personal attorney was listed as a silent partner in 3 of the shell companies used to launder the stolen funds. And most damning of all, investigators found encrypted emails between Harlow and Osman discussing operational security and timeline adjustments for what they referred to as Phase 2. What was Phase 2? The answer came from a 4th location raided that same morning, a remote property 80 miles northwest of Minneapolis, deep in the forests near the town of Brainerd. The property was listed as a youth leadership camp. It was advertised as a place where immigrant teens could learn teamwork, outdoor skills, and cultural pride. But when federal agents and local sheriff's deputies surrounded the compound at dawn, what they found was far more sinister. This was a training facility, not for leadership, for combat. The main building had been converted into a barracks. Bunk beds lined the walls, lockers were stacked with tactical clothing, boots, and balaclavas. In a storage shed behind the main structure, agents discovered crates of encrypted radios, night vision equipment, and body armor. They found training manuals written in Somali and Arabic. They found propaganda videos stored on USB drives. And in a locked basement accessible only through a hidden trapdoor, they found something that made every agent in that room realize this was no longer just a financial crime. Weapons, not a few handguns, not hunting rifles, military-grade firearms, AK-pattern rifles, dozens of them, stockpiled ammunition, explosives training materials, bomb-making components stored in labeled bins, maps of Minneapolis marked with circles around government buildings, transit hubs, and crowded public spaces. This wasn't preparation for defense. This was preparation for attack. At 6:03 a.m., the command center at FBI headquarters in Minneapolis lit up like a war room. A massive digital map covered the entire wall. Red markers pulsed across the Twin Cities metro area: St. Cloud, Mankato, Rochester, Duluth. Each marker represented a location tied to the New Horizon network. Over 900 federal agents were mobilized: FBI, ICE, ATF, DHS, local SWAT teams, state troopers. Black Hawk helicopters lifted off from staging areas. Armored vehicles rolled through quiet suburban streets. This was the largest coordinated federal operation in Minnesota's history. The raids happened fast, simultaneous strikes across 14 locations. Agents hit apartment complexes where cash couriers live. They stormed storage units filled with counterfeit documents and falsified donor records. They seized luxury cars registered to nonprofit board members who had never worked a legitimate job. They raided a halal grocery store in South Minneapolis that served as a front for wire transfer operations. They shut down a trucking company in Bloomington that had been moving bulk cash shipments disguised as humanitarian supplies. By noon, federal agents had seized over $250 million in total assets. They confiscated $1.4 million in cryptocurrency wallets. They recovered 47 illegal firearms. They arrested 63 individuals, including Ahmed Khalid Osman, 5 members of his inner circle, 2 state legislators who had taken bribes, and a senior officer in the Minneapolis Police Department who had been paid to tip off the network before audits. But the biggest arrest came that evening. At 7:34 p.m., federal marshals walked into the state capitol building and took Governor Vincent Harlow into custody. The charges were staggering: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, providing material support to a terrorist organization, racketeering, obstruction of justice, treason. The investigation didn't stop there. Analysts began tracing the money backward. They found that New Horizon Relief was just one node in a much larger network. There were similar operations in Ohio, in Michigan, in North Dakota. Each one followed the same blueprint: apply for federal refugee assistance grants, create fake service programs, skim the funds, launder the money overseas, and use a portion of it to radicalize vulnerable young men in the heartland of America. This wasn't just corruption. This was infiltration, a coordinated effort to exploit the American immigration and charity system to fund extremism abroad and build a sleeper infrastructure at home. The training camp in Brainerd wasn't an isolated experiment. Investigators found evidence of at least 2 other camps in rural Wisconsin and Iowa. They found recruiting materials distributed through community centers and mosques. They found online chat rooms where young men were being groomed with a mix of religious rhetoric, anti-American propaganda, and promises of purpose. And the scariest part? It had been happening for years, right under the noses of federal regulators, state auditors, nonprofit oversight board. The system wasn't just broken, it had been rewritten. Harlow and Osman had built a shadow infrastructure where money flowed freely, questions were never asked. And anyone who got too close was either paid off or silenced. But that silence is over now. The fallout from this operation will take years to fully understand. But what is clear right now is that the cost of this betrayal is measured in more than stolen dollars. It's measured in lives, in the young men who were manipulated into believing violence was the answer, in the families who came to America seeking safety and were instead exploited by the very people who claimed to protect them, in the communities that trusted leaders who saw them only as cover for crime. Power doesn't always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it hides behind smiles, handshakes, and the language of compassion. Sometimes it wears a suit and speaks at fundraisers. Sometimes it calls itself a hero while it arms the enemy. This story is a warning, a reminder that the most dangerous infiltration is not the one that comes from outside. It's the one that builds itself from within, using our laws, our generosity, our belief that people in positions of authority deserve our trust. If you're still watching this, tap like so more people see what really happened in Minneapolis. Comment expose if you believe corruption like this needs to be dragged into the light. And remember, this is a fictional dramatization, but the lessons it carries are real, because somewhere, right now, someone else is building another network, filing another grant, hiding another fortune, and waiting for the world to look the other way. Don't let them.